I'd like to say good evening to everyone. It's good to see everyone out this evening, and as we said earlier, we got a lot to be praying about. A lot of things going on. I will be meeting with the DS Tuesday. And we've got I've got one thing that needs to be signed by Greg and by Barbara. And then she will give me a check of whatever's left in our account, and I'll give that to him. And with this church then will be closed. He'll give it to it'll actually be the following week before it's actually closed. So I guess after we have our picnic, then we'll be meeting somewhere else. I still haven't heard back on that where we're going to be meeting at that point. But this church will be closed then, and then we will start the negotiation to purchase it and where we've started our new church. So that'll get us out of the United Methodist, and we'll become our own independent community church as soon as we can get this one closed, as I said, and get our new one, the building purchased. So that's where we're at on that. So that's coming along, kind of as we think. Barbara said there's not a whole lot left in the account, which is, I'm just going to give him whatever's in there. That's what we're going to give him. So, but anyway, we're in Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, we're finishing up probably the Sermon on the Mount, if we get all the way through it. We went through the first 12 verses of chapter 7, so we've talked about the judging of people, and we talked about the golden rule that Jesus preached on, but we're in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 13. Now, the thing about storytelling in Jesus' time, of course, they didn't have printed books. They were usually done by, the temples would have the scrolls. Now, not every temple had scrolls. If you were out in the country and they had a temple, most of the time they didn't have a scroll. And if you did, you didn't have the full Old Testament or the Torah. That's what they usually had. So you understand in Jesus' time, a lot of the things that was done and was told through stories. They had people, professional storytellers, that would go around telling stories. And it was pretty common in those stories, even in the letters that Paul and Peter and James, all the other ones that wrote, and even the Gospels, when they wrote them, people memorized them, which is kind of hard for us to believe that they would memorize that much. And a lot of times they went out and told what the letters said. So it was pretty common in those stories, though, if they told stories, to have a contrast between good and evil, death and life. So we're going to see that in this next section that closes out the Sermon on the Mount, those contrasts as they have. And he starts off and says in verse 13, "Enter ye in at the strait gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. And many there be which go thither," or thereat I guess will be it. "Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." Now, understanding that the Jewish people believed that they were the chosen people, so they just thought they would automatically want to go. They just thought that them, through their lineage of who their forefathers was, that they were going in. And a lot of times when they would talk about this, and this was pretty common to talk about the gate and the way, but most of the time the scholars or the rabbis of that time would teach that broad is the way to life. And only those few that didn't keep the commandments or didn't do the things that they were supposed to, that was a few, and that was the ones that was headed to destruction. But Jesus turned it around here, didn't he? He was talking about broad is the way that leads to destruction, and narrow is the way that leads to life. Because there were so many of the rabbis, the religious leaders, the teachers of that time, as they said that their hearts, that they did a lot of lip service, but their heart wasn't in it. They talked a good talk. They wanted to be seen. They didn't follow the rules themselves. They were more of a do as I say and not as I do type people. So when you see Jesus is trying to tell them that those that they think are the religious leaders and those that are making them, we can see so many through his teaching of that. So he's talking about that straight way. Then he tells us of another choice. He says, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravaging wolves. Now there was a lot of people that were thieves or robbers or whatever. A lot of times they would put on, and there was a lot of stories at that time of how people would take the sheep clothing and they'd put them on and sneak into the herd and steal the sheep. Of course, we know ravaging wolves don't wouldn't put on something like that. But he's talking mostly here of the false prophets. Well, what is a false prophet? He says in verse 16, "You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes or of thorns or figs of thistles?" Seeing that we would know them by their fruit. If they didn't preach something that drew you closer to God, or did they preach something that pulled you away from God? Was they more interested in preaching and upholding themselves as being righteous and good? Or did they preach and teach of a righteous God?
Where do these people derive from? Did they come out of the chosen people of God, out of the 12 tribes?
A lot of them did, yes.
A lot of them you think was outsiders?
Well, I think if you go back and study a lot of the history of it, we can see, and I think that's what y'all been teaching between you and Greg of our Sunday morning services of how they were overtaken by Babylon, and you know, they took the better ones with them, and there was a lot that was left that was scattered abroad. Well, those that were scattered abroad, of course, they had to live with the Gentiles. They had to live with those that was there in that area. So I think that even when they came back, you can see how they were attacked and how they fought. They said they would build with one hand and have a sword in another. And I think that influence remained with them even until Jesus' time.
Well, it talked there too about I think the Pharisees, they put on all these long, shiny garments and on street corners. It boggles my mind, though, how they could be chosen of God and trying to be a false prophet for Satan. You know, he was an angel.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes into a lot of that. As man sets in, what God set up was righteous. What he set up was perfect. Man corrupted. And as there are several hundred years between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of Jesus' time, in those hundreds of years, and even before that, they would corrupt what God has created. And I think that corruption continued, and that's why the love of money is bad. Right? The love of money. And I think when you see the temples, there was a lot of things happened in the temples that probably wasn't supposed to be originally set up. A lot of people that have money, they would store it in the temple even, because most people wasn't going to break in and steal from the temple. They break into your homes and steal, but not the temple. So as the temple became more rich, and Solomon built these tremendous temples that was tore down, and they came back and they reestablished them and built them back. But when they see the money and the power that they had over the people, they began to take from them. And even they talked about how they took the widows' homes and how they changed the laws around to where you didn't have to take care of your mother or your parents. And if you left it in what they called a trust to the temple, then you didn't have to share it or do it. And so there were so many things they changed and made laws to where it benefited them, and they become pretty rich from it. Made a pretty good living from it. So I could see how it would corrupt people. So when Jesus starts teaching here about these false prophets, he uses something that's very important. Grapes and figs is something that they made a lot of money from. It was something they used a lot in their cooking, and they relied upon them in certain times of the years. Of course, we all know that the thorns and thistles was something that we cut down and they cut down, and it was no good for nothing. So again, he's given that contrast of the good and of the bad. Do men gather grapes and figs, or do they gather thorns and thistles? It says, even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth what? Evil fruit. He's using agriculture terms, something that everyone in his audience that was listening would know what these terms mean. It's an easy way to teach things is with an object lesson. Folks, a lot of the good preachers, and if you watch them, will use an object or something in their preaching. Teachers are taught this all the time. I've spoke with teachers. We have teachers in our family, and we talk about it, and they said that they're taught to use an object with their lesson. I remember I come down here one time, I used a little weight to talk about how a little bit of weight carrying it around will overload you. That if you use something, and that's the reason why he's using these terms, these agriculture terms, of thorns and thistles and figs and grapes, because it's something they understand. So by grasping to that, they can understand the choices that he's laying out before them. You're going to have bad teachers that's going to lead you astray, or you're going to have good teachers that point you to God. He says a good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. You're going to be one or the other. But what he's telling the audience that's listening to him is choose what one you want to be. What example do you want to be? Which teacher are you following? Jesus is trying to tell them, come follow me. I will show you the good way. A tree cannot have good and bad fruit. Just as he's already told us in this Sermon on the Mount, you can't serve two masters. You're going to hate the one and cleave and go after the one. You can't have two. You have to choose. What did Isaiah say? As for me and my house, we choose the Lord. He says, every tree that bringeth not good fruit is what? Hewn down and cast into the fire. There's going to come a judgment day, even for those teachers. See, again, he's using agriculture terms, knowing that when they prune away the bad, it leaves what left, it gets more healthy, doesn't it? Folks, it's the same way in our lives. God sometimes, it hurts a little bit, but He has sometimes pruned away things out of our lives that's bad for us so that we can grow. It might be some friends you're hanging around with, something from your old life before you come to Christ and accepted Him. And so there's things in your life that He may have to prune away and get rid of. Maybe it's hanging around with, some of the family. See, Jim's not here tonight. I can pick on Jim and Larry. Say, boy, you guys, no, I'm just, surely you got to watch these brothers now. But all of us probably knows there's people in our own families that if you talk to them about God, they don't want to hear it, and they go hang around the wrong places, and they want to take you out with them, and see, we have to watch those. Sometimes we have to prune things out of our lives that God will prune out for us. Usually He takes care of them for us. But it's for our own good. We may not like it, but it helps us to grow.
You leave one rotten apple in a bushel and leave it settle well and see what happens.
Yeah.
You have a lot of them.
Yeah. A good tree cannot bring forth evil, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good. Every tree that bringeth not good fruit is hewed down and cast into the fire. Therefore, by their fruit you shall know them. Now, we've talked earlier about, and a week or two back, about being a fruit inspector and judging, and the fruit that they have here is the verse that a lot of them uses to talking about. Therefore, by their fruit you shall know them. People that claims the name of Christians, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit, you can tell by the way they live, does their talk match their walk? Is the things in their life point towards God? Does it point to help others grow and themselves to grow? You can judge and figure that out pretty quickly, usually on your own. Because He says here, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. So many people says, I'm a Christian, but do they act like it? Most of the time, a true Christian, they don't have to tell you they're a Christian. You can tell by the way they act, don't you? Are they good people? Of course, I know being good is not a prerequisite. Hell is full of good people. I've heard that preached so many times. But you can usually tell because it says that your spirit will intercede with my spirit that's within me, and we should know each other.
Bear witness.
Bear witness. That's the words I was looking for. A lot of times you can tell a Christian by the way they act, by the way they conduct themselves, how they treat others. You can tell that because there's a lot of others that claim the name of Christians that don't act like it. I've told you all about a couple of one time that I had some dealings with at my work and in the community and doing stuff, and and I'm telling you what, they was, I'm not going to say ungodly people, but they walked around with a frown on their face all the time. I thought they was some of the grumpiest people I've ever met. I mean, I went to a church one night to sing, and there he was up front leading services, just a smile on his face and praising the Lord and how happy he was. But when you see him out, he just was total opposite. And I'm thinking, I would have never guessed that he was a Christian. Never said he was, never acted like he was. There's a lot of people that's like that in this world. That says they are, but can you look at the fruit of the life that they live?
Maybe he was when he was in church, when he walked through them doors back there, maybe.
And that's you know that's what I was telling y'all Sunday when I was preaching. Folks, in the church here is when I feel the best. When I'm around you guys and when I'm around other Christians and we're having a good time, we're fellowshipping, that's a good part. It's outside of these walls is where it gets tough. It's tough outside these walls. It's tough. But it says here, that not all that says, Lord, Lord, shall enter into that kingdom. But which ones will? The one that doeth the will of the Father, which is in heaven. He told his disciples, ask me, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So he has things, the commandments, we need to keep them. And what was it? We just studied that last Wednesday night when the Pharisees come out and ask him what's the greatest of the commandments. There was a discussion going on and had went on for hundreds of years of what is the greatest of the commandments. Now some believed it was to honor your mother and your father. And others argued, and Jesus told them this, to love your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second was likened unto it, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. Are you doing those things? That's the will of the Father, I believe.
I don't think one over the other.
They're the same thing. They should be pretty much the same thing.
There's the law and the prophets hinges upon these two.
Yep.
You do them too, the others will get in place. I
think so. And it's like he said, if you do those two things, love your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love each other, and I think all the rest of it, as he says, will all fall right in line.
If you love somebody, you're going to hurt them.
No, that's right. You're going to, if you care for people, treat others like the way you would like to be treated. I think that's pretty fair of any of us if we think about anything that we do. Sometimes we slip up though and we do mess up, don't we? It happens.
When you're a Christian, your face will tell whether you are or not. We're supposed to let our light shine, and I think it comes out in your actions, you meet somebody on the street, and they look like they're really down, and you just stop and say hi or smile at them, you'll know, there's a difference in people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Some of them looks like, I don't know, the old devil just ready to pop out any time. I've seen a lot of people like that. Mm-hmm. They don't want to talk to you about the Lord, just get away from me. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But that's all right. We'll talk about it anyway.
Yeah. I would hope that when people see you, they know that you're going to talk about the Lord, Joe. My grandma, I can remember her. Well, I wish I could be like that. She would go to the hospital. I remember one time my sister-in-law, Jerry's wife, was in the hospital. She just had a Paul at Montgomery. I think it was Montgomery where she had Paul. And my grandma walks up and walks in her room and says, "How you doing, sweetie?" And she said, of course, she always called everybody sweetie. And I call a lot of people sweetie too because I'm used to, or she called them honey. I don't call them honey, I call them sweetie. But, and she walked in and asked her how she was doing. She said, "Well, good," and that's fine, okay, good. She said, "I'm going to go talk to some people." And my grandma would leave and go up to every room she could stick her head in and ask if everybody knew Jesus. Because you knew if you saw my grandma coming, she was going to talk to you about Jesus and tell you how good Jesus is too.
You know, the churches and stuff used to go and visit people that it's not in church. Sick or whatever, they don't do that.
They don't. And I think that is one of the reasons why we see falling away. The Bible tells us in the end times there's going to be a great falling away. And I think part of that is I guess the nurturing that we used to do. I don't know that we do as much of that. I think a lot of that falls upon now everybody thinks it's the pastor's job. And we pay him, let him go do that. And instead of the church going and doing it like they used to. It used to be you go check on your neighbors and you know, as the church. And I can remember Grandma, some of the women would get together and they would go visit the women in the community. And the men would go visit the men in the community. And they just don't do that anymore. You used to go check on your shut-ins a lot more, and those that were sick, and as you said, and you just don't see it anymore. And I think that's probably why some of it is you're seeing the falling away as part of that.
Nursing homes and hospitals and stuff.
Some churches still has those ministries. I know that up Mount Olive, up on top of the hill, that church goes down to Montgomery at least once a month and preaches and sings to them, and I think that's a wonderful ministry to have. But yeah, you don't see it as much as you used to. I can remember when my grandmother was in the nursing home, we'd go visit her on Sundays, and there was almost a church in there, almost every, not the same ones, but there would be different ones in there, and you just don't see it anymore. I know Randy White and his wife and them that sings with them, they go to the one in Montgomery, I think once a month and sings. So yeah, you don't see the visiting and things that you used to have. 22 says, many will say to me in that day. Now I think that's the judgment day. The judgment day, when it happens, they'll say, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils? And in thy name have done many wonderful works? I don't believe you're saved by works, are you? You're saved by accepting Jesus Christ as your Savior in the perfect work that He's done. See, they list all these works here that they've done. We've done all these things. We've worked for you. We prophesied for you. We've done the services. We've done, we've been to church every Sunday and all these different things that people will use as an excuse. He says, then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Won't that be a sad day? There are so many, I believe, that are fooled and believing that they're saved because so many churches are teaching that. Go to church and accept Jesus and go on and do whatever you want to do and you're saved. Because once you're in grace, you're always in grace. And I believe that is a terrible, terrible thing to be teaching people. That they can go out and do whatever they want to and they're going to be saved.
After Jesus came on from the mount, some disciples came to him and was trying to cast out a demon. They couldn't. He said, "Oh, you little faith."
Yeah.
And I wonder about how these people here that are, I guess if they're this false prophets or whatever, they're still casting out demons. They say they did. How are they doing that? That'd be almost like casting out Satan with power of Satan, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, that or maybe they were in there and they were doing them at one time, but then they fell away. Maybe they were in a backslidden condition. Maybe they turned their back on God later. I don't know what he doesn't go into that much detail to really say. But I've often thought of that myself too.
Yeah.
The last contrast that he has here is another one. He says, therefore whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them. Hear him and do them. Not just hear him only. I were likened unto a wise man who built his house on a rock. A solid foundation. Matter of fact, later on, Jesus is the rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon the house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. So when you're founded upon a rock, folks, and all of us knows that when you build a house, we dig footers and we try to get down below the frost line and get down to where something's solid. You pour a concrete in it and you build up. I know you know all about building.
Been there and done that.
I know you have. So when you're building, you want something solid to build upon. So he's using this illustration of building a house, also use it for building up our faith. You have to start off with a solid foundation, and that's Jesus Christ and the perfect work that he did on the cross. We have to understand that he calls himself the rock later on. Upon this rock, he said, I will build my church. So he is a solid foundation that has, when we start our faith with that foundation and we do these things and listen and hear him and do what he'd have us to do, we're going to be pretty solid in it. But he says, and everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rains descended, and the flood came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell. Not only did it fall, it says, and great was the fall of it. Great was the fall of it. Not just a regular fall. Again, contrasting between two things, life and death. The life in Christ and our heavenly home if we hear these sayings of his and do them. But a life separated from Christ, or separated from God, is hell. When you're separated from God, even in this world, if you're separated from God due to sin in our lives and have that separation, we are men most miserable. Because our hope is only in this world. There's a lot of churches out there, and the Bible tells us that if we believe it in our heart and confess it with our mouth, that we shall be saved. There's a lot of churches that teach that, and that's true. It's in the Bible. But a lot of them stops there. We also need to teach about repentance. Growing. That's the base. That is the base. That's the rock. Believe it in your heart and confess it with your mouth. That's when ye shall be saved. That is just the beginning of our foundation. Next comes repentance and knowing that the things we've done was wrong and sin, and ask for forgiveness and turning away from it. And then we can build up from there. So Jesus is finishing up his message here. And it came to pass when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people was astonished at his doctrine. See, he taught totally different in his message than all the great rabbis of the world.
He started to maybe 12 years old.
He did. For he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes, not as the rabbis, not as the teachers of the time. He didn't teach the same way they did. He taught because he had the authority to teach. Boy, isn't that something? All right, that'll finish up our Sermon on the Mountain. And I don't know if someone has anything else. Greg, you want to check our box back there? I don't know if anybody put anything in there or not. If not, we may continue on with something. We'll find something that someone may want to do, or something we may want to. Box is empty. Okay, we'll find something next time, and maybe I'll put it out on our messenger to everyone, and we'll probably be creating a new one as well for our new church and stuff as well. So we may work on that as well. Does anyone have anything else?
Did you ever find a place?
Not yet. I haven't heard back from them. I'm going to get an answer. Probably try to find something before Sunday. So because the Sunday after that we'll be in our picnic. So and then it'll be the following Sunday after that we'll be meeting somewhere else. So I don't know where that's going to be at yet. I haven't got an answer back.